Welcome to the deep dive. You send us the info, we pull out the essentials.
And today we're digging into something potentially transformative: agroecology.
Yeah, we've got a stack of reviews, reports, all pointing towards this as, well, maybe a way to reshape our whole agri-food system.
That's the plan. Our mission really is to sift through all this and find the core insights. What is agroecology? What are its main
How
ideas?
does it actually impact things, the benefits, the challenges?
Exactly, all the crucial stuff without getting totally overwhelmed.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Agroecology. What are we actually talking about here? It sounds bigger than just, farming methods.
Oh, it definitely is. Fundamentally, it's about weaving ecological principles into how we design and manage food systems.
From field to fork.
And beyond.
And beyond, yeah. Aiming for real sustainability, resilience. But it's interesting because it works on, different levels.
Different levels, how so?
Well, you can think of it as a science,
Hmm.
right? Studying the interactions within these agroecosystems.
But it's also a practical toolkit. Specific practices farmers use, like crop rotation, maybe biological pest control.
Right. Things you can actually do.
And importantly, it's also a social movement, pushing for food systems that aren't just sustainable, but also fair, equitable, just.
Ah, okay. So it connects healthy land with healthy communities.
Precisely. And that really comes through in the sources, this strong focus on people.
Hmm.
It's about social justice, equity, not just environmental stuff.
Hmm.
And the definition itself seems to have broadened over time. It used to be more about the farm, the field.
But now it's the whole system,
Exactly, the whole agri-food system.
right? From growing to consuming to what happens with the waste.
Yeah.
And it's pulling in knowledge from lots of different areas, not just biology.
Absolutely not. These reports really stress how transdisciplinary it is. It uses ecology, sure, but also sociology, economics, technology, even politics.
No, you need all those perspectives to grasp the whole picture.
You do. It's about understanding that complex web, ecological, social, economic that shapes our food.
So the big aim then, is it fair to say it's a fundamental shift in how we approach food? Production, consumption, everything. Linking environmental health with social and economic well-being.
That nails it. It's a really holistic vision for where food could go.
Okay, got it. So that's agroecology. Now let's talk about the stage it plays on. This term agri-food systems keeps cropping up. What does that encompass?
Yeah, good question. Think of the agri-food system as, well, everything. The entire network involved in food, from the absolute beginning right through to the end.
All the actors, all the activities.
The whole value chain.
So much more than just farms.
Oh, way more. It's crop production, livestock, yeah, but also fisheries, aquaculture, forestry. Then you've got processing, packing, transport,
Distribution, marketing.
consumption, and crucially, what happens to the waste afterwards. Farm to fork and beyond, truly.
And all along that chain, you've got economic pressures, social factors, environmental impact.
Constantly shaping it, which is why the goal is moving towards sustainable agri-food systems.
Yeah.
Meaning systems that give us food security and nutrition now, but without wrecking the economic, social, or environmental basis for future generations.
So profitable, good for society, and neutral or even positive for the planet.
That's the ideal, yeah.
It definitely sounds more complex than the simple farm-to-table idea we often hear.
It really is. Farm to table is useful, but it's linear. The systems view helps us see all the connections, the feedback loops.
And understanding that complexity is key to seeing how agroecology might actually change things system-wide, not just on one farm.
Exactly, the ripple effects.
Okay, makes sense. So we have agroecology, we have the agri-food system it aims to transform. Let's get into the mechanics. What are the core principles driving agroecology?
Right. These principles are kind of like the design guidelines. They help shape practices towards that goal of sustainability, equity, working with nature, not against it. Resource efficiency, social fairness, ecological harmony, those are the big themes.
And the sources lay out quite a few. Maybe we can touch on some key ones. Biodiversity and diversification seem to pop up everywhere. Why are they so fundamental?
They really are foundational. Biodiversity across the board, generic diversity in seeds and breeds, species diversity on the farm, landscape diversity, it's seen as absolutely vital for productivity and resilience.
So it's not just about having a nice mix of things visually.
Haha, no, not just aesthetics, it's deeply functional. Think about crop rotation, planting different things season after season.
Temporal diversity.
Exactly, breaks pest cycles. Or intercropping, growing different crops together in the same space.
That's spatial diversity. Optimizes resources like sun, water, nutrients, and maybe suppresses weeds.
You got it. Agroforestry, mixing trees with crops or animals, adds vertical layers, tons of benefits. Even just using different varieties of, say, wheat or traditional livestock breeds builds that crucial diversity.
And that diversity helps buffer against, well, everything. Climate shifts, new pests.
Precisely. It builds resilience, and it can boost ecosystem services, better pollination, healthier soil, cleaner water. Remember that statistic you mentioned from one report?
Oh yeah, the one about a 10% increase in plant diversity, leading to a 40% drop in pests without chemicals. That was striking.
Really shows the power of diversity in action.
Okay. Another big one seems to be nutrient cycling and soil health, a real focus on the ground beneath our feet.
Absolutely central. It's all about optimizing how nutrients flow through the system, keeping them cycling within the farm as much as possible, closing the loops.
Kind of like nature does, right? Where waste from one thing feeds another.
Exactly that. So practices like using crop residues, composting organic matter back into the soil, cover cropping is another big one.
Planting things not to harvest, but just to protect the soil, build structure, maybe add nutrients like nitrogen.
Right, legumes are great for that. It's about feeding the soil food web, building organic matter, enhancing soil life,
Which then supports healthier plants, reduces the need for synthetic fertilizers.
and improves things like water retention. It boosts long-term productivity and makes the farm more resilient.
Okay. Then there's synergy and integration. Sounds like making things work together better.
That's the core idea, enhancing the positive interactions between all the different parts, the plants, animals, trees, soil, water, making the whole greater than the sum of its parts.
Can you give an example?
Sure, crop-livestock integration is a classic. Animals eat crop residues or cover crops.
And their manure fertilizes the fields.
Right, reduces need for outside feed and fertilizer.
Right.
Or agroforestry, again, trees providing shade, wind protection, habitat, nutrients from leaf litter. It's about finding those win-wins.
Seeing the farm as an interconnected ecosystem,
Totally. Less as separate production units.
which leads nicely into efficiency and recycling, using resources wisely.
Yep. It's about making the most of local renewable resources, closing nutrient cycles, biomass cycles, producing more with less external stuff.
Which cuts costs and environmental impact.
Both. And it can be of simple things, like deep-rooted trees tapping into nutrients lower down, or complex, like using manure digesters. It boosts farmer autonomy, too.
Less reliance on outside inputs means more control.
And more resilience.
Resilience comes up again. So how specifically does agroecology build that capacity to withstand shocks, climate change, economic downturns?
Well, as we said, diversity is huge. Different crops, different animals, they respond differently to stress. If one fails, others might survive. It's like insurance.
A natural safety net.
Exactly. And healthy soil holds more water, so it's better against drought and heavy rain, reduces erosion. Plus, being less dependent on volatile external markets for inputs insulates farmers somewhat from price shocks.
Makes sense. The last principle I wanted to ask about is this idea of co-creation and sharing of knowledge. It sounds very collaborative.
It is. It fundamentally values all kinds of knowledge. Scientific knowledge, yes, but also the practical, hands-on experience of farmers, traditional knowledge passed down generations, local ecological understanding.
So it's not just top-down solutions from labs.
Not at all. It emphasizes participatory approaches. Farmers involved in the research, farmer-to-farmer exchanges to share what works locally.
Valuing that practical wisdom.
Absolutely. The goal is context-specific innovation, solutions that actually fit the local reality and are more likely to be adopted because people were involved in creating them.
It paints a really different picture of agricultural development. Okay, so when these principles are applied, what are the actual results? What impacts and transformations do we see on the ground?
Well, the impacts are broad, hitting environmental, social, and economic dimensions. Environmentally, you often see those ecosystem services really improving.
Like carbon storage, water regulation, pollination.
Exactly. And usually a significant drop in synthetic inputs like pesticides and fertilizers.
Our sources definitely point to clear benefits. Boosting biodiversity by creating habitats, building soil health and organic matter, using resources like water more efficiently, and things like agroforestry actively help mitigate climate change, right? Pulling carbon out of the air.
Precisely. Then, on the socioeconomic side, the picture is, well, often positive, but nuanced.
How so?
Many studies show improved incomes and productivity for farmers adopting agroecology. But, it's true, sometimes it requires more labor, especially initially. That's a key consideration.
But it also seems to empower farmers, particularly smallholders. Through participation, more control.
Absolutely. And that ties into this crucial concept of food sovereignty.
Which is about.
Communities having control over their own food systems, defining their own agricultural and food policies, producing food that's culturally appropriate, locally controlled.
So it's about fairness, equity, better rural livelihoods, respecting local culture and traditions.
Yes, all of that. And making sure marginalized groups, women, youth, indigenous peoples are included and have fair access to land and resources. It's really trying to address those deep inequalities in the food system.
So not just changing farming techniques, but potentially changing power dynamics too.
That's a huge part of it, which leads to the potential for transforming the whole food system. Moving away from these very globalized, commodity-focused systems towards more localized networks. Shorter supply chains, stronger farmer-consumer links, more diverse markets, prioritizing community resilience and that idea of food sovereignty.
It definitely sounds like a compelling vision, but it also sounds like a massive shift from the current dominant industrial agricultural model. What are the roadblocks? What makes this transition difficult?
Oh, there are definitely significant hurdles. A big one is simply awareness and knowledge. Many farmers just haven't been exposed to these ideas or don't have the skills needed.
A steep learning curve, perhaps. And what about the economics? Starting up, perceived risks.
Exactly. There can be initial investment costs, maybe a dip in yield during the transition phase, which is risky for farmers. Getting access to markets that actually value agroecological products and pay a fair price can be tough.
And the whole policy landscape might be tilted against it.
Often, yes. Subsidies, regulations. They tend to favor the conventional large-scale model that makes it harder for agroecology to compete on a level playing field.
Plus, just inertia, right?
Yeah.
Resistance to change, sticking with what's familiar.
That's a huge factor. And agroecology isn't a simple recipe book. It needs tailoring to each specific place. That complexity can be a barrier.
And we need more long-term data, maybe.
Definitely. More long-term research to really prove the benefits and understand the trade-offs over time. And let's be honest, the influence of powerful players invested in the current industrial system is also a major challenge.
Okay, so it's a mix of practical, economic, policy, social, and even political challenges. It's complex. But despite those challenges, the sources also highlight opportunities, right? A path forward.
For sure. One big driver is growing consumer interest. People want food that's sustainable, ethical. That creates market opportunities.
The pull from the demand side.
Exactly. And we're seeing more recognition from policymakers, international bodies. That could translate into more support, more funding down the line.
Which could fuel more innovation. Developing context-specific practices, maybe integrating technology appropriately.
Yes, absolutely. And continuing to emphasize those participatory approaches, co-creating knowledge with farmers, is key to making sure innovations are relevant and get adopted.
And the connection to broader goals, like the Sustainable Development Goals.
That provides a strong justification, a framework. It shows how agroecology contributes to multiple global targets: poverty, hunger, climate, biodiversity.
So looking ahead, what are the key research gaps? Where do we need more investigation?
Several areas stand out. How can digital tools help? How can we use tech smartly to boost efficiency or help scale things up?
Scaling up seems critical, moving from farm-level success to whole landscapes.
Definitely. We need better methods for that scaling process. Also, really quantifying the long-term trade-offs, ecologically, socially, economically. We need more long-term studies tracking impacts over decades.
Getting beyond the short-term snapshot.
Precisely. Other areas include digging deeper into the policy and socioeconomic shifts needed for a transition, exploring urban agroecology, applying these principles in cities.
Growing food closer to where people live.
Yeah. And the links between agroecology and human health nutrition, exposure to pesticides, etc. And finally, just better ways to measure performance. Agroecology delivers multiple benefits, so we need assessment tools that capture that whole picture, not just yield or profit.
Right, measuring success more holistically.
Yeah.
Okay, this has been incredibly informative. If you had to boil it down, what's the main takeaway from this deep dive into agroecology?
I think the core message is that agroecology offers a really compelling, integrated approach. It's a pathway towards food systems that are genuinely more sustainable, definitely more resilient, and critically more equitable. It connects ecology, social values, innovation, aiming for benefits for both people and the planet.
And it seems clear that while the transition has real challenges, the potential upsides for the environment, for livelihoods, for food security, for the quality of our food are just too significant to ignore. It warrants serious attention.
Absolutely. It's not necessarily the single answer, but it's a powerful framework, a different way of thinking that addresses many of today's big food system problems.
So maybe a final thought for our listeners. When you think about your food, consider shifting perspective. Not just a production line, but this intricate web, ecological and social. And imagine how embracing things like diversity, synergy, local knowledge, how that might actually change our relationship with food and with the planet itself. What role could each of us play in that shift?
Definitely something to chew on.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.